Hey.
Good morning. Made me happy. Went to Home Depot this morning, and when I pulled up in the driveway, do you know what I saw?
Your kid mowing the yard.
My daughter mowing the lawn and putting in the effort to do the diagonal stripes.
Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo.
And today, we're going to talk about decisiveness.
Decisiveness in the face of disappointment.
You did a sermon on this a while ago.
Yeah, so so from time to time, what we do is I grab old sermon notes, and we're kind of recycling some stuff that I've studied in the past and things, and putting them out in this format.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a great way to leverage work that's already been done. I remember when I did the sermon, it was when we were in Spain, and I was a chaplain at the chapel there. And one of the things that, I think I've realized over the years is that there are things you can anticipate in life on a general level that you can prepare for. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you can prepare to be disappointed. Doesn't mean you have to live with a pessimistic attitude and, kind of a Debbie Downer, woe is me, and, just waiting for everything to go wrong. You know what I mean? But you can prepare, like there's a mental and a heart posture that says, we do live in a broken world. We do live with people that we may love, that we know love us, but they're going to disappoint us. We're going to disappoint them.
Yeah.
We're going to, there's going to be things that happen that are unexpected that you couldn't have planned for, but you could anticipate being disappointed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, in that context, we're going to look at Psalm 62, and what we're going to explore what we're going to do is we're going to kind of extract from this psalm, which is written by David, is actually a song. So these are like lyrics to a song. So Olivia has brought her guitar and she's written a song to this. Oh, you didn't have time to do that? Okay. Man, should we delay this podcast?
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Cue the music.
No, we don't know what the song was, but what we do know is that these were lyrics to a song. Mm-hmm. And it was, so it's David laying out how he's wrestling with some disappointment in his life. Now, do you want me to tell you the backstory to this psalm before or after?
Go ahead before.
You want to do it before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Set me up for success.
Okay. So David is king of Jerusalem, or king of Israel, right? So all 12 tribes, he's united Israel. He's established the borders of Israel. He's defeated all of the enemies of the Lord. He's the king that, the Lord wanted him to be, for the most part. Like, he had some foul ups, and we're not going to get into any of that today, but he is in this place where he's older now in life, and what has happened is that he plans on giving his kingdom to his son Solomon, who the Lord has identified as the next king of Israel. But he has another son, and his other son is Absalom, and Absalom wants the kingdom, and he has slowly been building a group of people that are on his side of taking over the kingdom. And so he is raising up this cabal to do a government coup where David will be overthrown and Absalom will be made king of Israel. There's a variety of ways he goes about doing this, but one of the ways is that people would come to see the king and have him make decisions and some high case decisions for the land. And Absalom would park himself right outside of that entry point. And when people would come up, he'd say, like, well, David's a little too busy for you. What's going on? And they tell him, he's like, well, as the son of the king, let me tell you how to handle the situation. And so he was putting himself in some key places where he began to win the hearts and the minds of the people that then those affections were getting stolen away from David. Mm-hmm. So as a result, when he goes to place himself as king of Israel, David has to flee. So David is on the run again. So there's times when David's been on the run from Saul, right? The first king of Israel, and now he's on the run again. As he was on the run from Saul as a young man, now he's on the run again, but from his son, who's his son is the young man, and now David's the old man on the run. And so his life is very much bookended by, I was being the man God called me to be, and here are people that should be close to me, that should be of support to me, that I've done nothing to against, but nonetheless they want what the Lord has given me, and they're trying to take it with ill-gotten means. So I share that to say, like, that's an extreme example of dealing with disappointment. Here's a son that's betrayed you. Here's people that you've tried to rule rightly that have abandoned you, that have betrayed you. Here's, you've done all of this hard work. You've trusted the Lord for all of these victories, and it seems like it's all being stripped away very, very quickly by those that don't seem to care what the Lord wants, don't have the Lord's agenda in mind. And so I think if, we're all going to go through those disappointments, right? There's going to be days when just, common everyday things are frustrating and annoying and things like that. But then there's going to be those times when you go through seasons where, like, people betray you, people hurt you, people that you've loved don't love you back. People misunderstand how you maybe meant something. And then they react in a way that's painful to you, right? So there's this, there are these things that we know are going to happen in life. Yeah. So how can we, or what are some decisions that we can make prior to being disappointed that position our hearts in a manner that when we go through disappointment, our heart's already in a posture to trust in the Lord, to let Him navigate us through that disappointment, versus a lot of alternative paths that the enemy want to present to us that would have us go down some roads we shouldn't go down. Yeah. Okay, so that's a really big, long setup to Psalm 62.
Yeah. Don't we read it?
Yeah, and this is 12 verses, so it's a little bit lengthy.
It's a hunk.
Yeah, but Olivia, you want to go ahead and read that for us?
King James Version. I'm kidding.
What translation are you using?
Mine's ESV.
Okay, which stands for?
English Standard Version?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, I was really hoping I got that right. If I didn't, cue the music. Next week, we'll bring the guitar. So Psalm 62, verse 1 through 12, it says, "For God alone my soul waits in silence. From Him comes my salvation. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. How long will all of you attack a man to batter him? Like a leaning wall, a tottering fence. They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse." I am so sorry. And then in verse 5 it says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from Him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock, my God, my refuge is God. Trust in Him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts before Him. God is a refuge for us. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. Put no trust in extortion. Did I say that right? Extortion. Sorry. Set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice I have heard this, that your power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love, for you will render to a man according to his work."
Okay.
Sorry, that was chunky.
No, it's okay. So there's, in some ways, the way the psalm is laid out here, before we start kind of extracting the lessons that are out of here for us. The psalm is one of those things. This is a psalm where David is both speaking to his, well, in this case, to Absalom, his son, right? So he's speaking to the person who's coming against him. He's speaking to the Lord, but then he's also speaking to himself, right? So there's these kind of three different directions in which he's having that audience. I don't know. Have you ever done that where like you're frustrated with somebody and you play out in your mind the conversation you would have with them?
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that all you're going to say?
Yeah.
Is this too fresh right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Are you dealing with some...
Mine has like a 2-day rebound rate.
What does that mean?
So like if I'm frustrated with someone, like I don't have anything to say within the moment, but I'll have something to say like 2 or 3 days later.
Oh, okay.
But then it's like,
but
then it's worthless.
Is it in the meantime like you're playing out the conversation you wish you would have had?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I still have one from 2 years ago.
Oh, really? Do you want to talk about that or not? I'll take the sign.
It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, so I'd rather just
keep a lid on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll save it for the next podcast.
Okay, well, let's see. I mean...
I might come up again.
All right. So the thing is, you know, well, so like in the first two verses, you know, he says, all right, my soul, I'm going to wait on my soul in the Lord, right? He's my rock, he's my salvation, he's my fortress. So the first decision that we have to make, and I would say these are decisions you have to make, not just in the face of disappointment, but these are decisions to get in the habit of making so that when you become disappointed, you're already in a good zone of making some healthy decisions, right? So the first is, decision number 1 is I choose to wait on God in silence. So David says, for God alone my soul waits in silence, for him comes my salvation. He alone is my rock, my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken, right? We live in an incredibly busy world. So this is a time where everybody can be listening to something all the time. So do you find yourself listening to, like, always having something playing?
It's like I don't know what to do in the silence.
Oh, okay.
Like then I like start thinking. So I always have music playing, or I always have a podcast, or I'm on social media, or I'm watching a show. Like I always have something playing, and I do think it leaves some kind of impact on you in the way you make your decisions. Yeah.
And I think there's and I'm the same sort of way, like from, usually get up in the morning, take a shower, and then I, like on my drive to work, for a while what I was doing is I was like listening to the news or some kind of news podcast or something, and business leadership or church leadership. And then I'd get to work, and I'd get to work really early in the morning because I have like about a 45-minute to an hour commute. And when I get there, I would then have my devotions. Because if I have my devotions at the house and I wait later, then that 45-hour-minute commute can turn into an hour-and-a-half commute. I don't want it to be that long. So I'd rather spend that time at the office with having my devotions. But what I was finding is that in that drive, if I'm listening, whatever I'm listening to begins to shape my heart and mind for the day. And so when I sit down and I have my devotions, if I haven't been listening to something that guides my soul, or if I just sit and drive in silence, then my heart isn't in the right place. Do you know what I mean? And so this first point so David did not wrestle with, nobody ever went to David, hey, what podcast are you listening to?
You're right.
Or do you want to be on my podcast?
We'd love to have you.
David, we'd love to hear about this Goliath story. Tell us about it.
First-hand experience.
Yeah. So when he says, I chose, for God alone, my soul waits in silence. Have you ever been in a situation to where you had to wait on someone else to tell you what was going on?
In like what kind of context?
It could be any context, but like, let's say it's somebody that you need something from. Like, you go to the doctor's office and, you sit there and they got the magazines and you can get on your phone and things like that. But there's that like, or I could just wait in silence. I could wait for the doctor to come back and be, hey, we're ready to see you now, or here's the blood results, or here's the test that came back, but that moment of waiting in silence, because what you want is the minute they walk in the room with information, you want to be ready to go. You want to be ready to receive it. Mm-hmm. Versus if you're distracted with something else,
you might miss it.
Yeah, you're not going to be as quickly tuned in to what's being said as a result. So that kind of waiting in silence cultivates the mind and heart in a way that when the Lord speaks, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
That's what I've been waiting to hear.
Clear as day. I will say there have been, more like, the first thing that came to mind was like 21 days prayer. And there was one sermon. So it starts at 6 a.m. So you have to get up at like 5:30.
Yeah.
And it's usually during the weekdays and then a little bit later. We've talked about it on the podcast, but there was one day where it was talking about like the benefit of just like being quiet and just letting God speak. And I feel like I like hearing my voice. I have that. It's not a great habit, but whenever I come to God, it's with a bunch of wants. And so I remember just trying to sit there and like blocking out, because I feel like when you just sit in silence, all of these things come to the surface.
Sure.
Or like your deepest thoughts that are like just arising. Like, why am I thinking about that? Like, right. Like I have not positioned myself in a place where I can just sit in silence and wait for the Lord. Because if this is what I'm thinking about in this setting, there's a greater root at hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think let me ask you this. Is what you're saying, if I wait and sit in silence, there's other things I'm going to have to start wrestling with. I don't want to wrestle with. Other thoughts I don't want to be thinking about. Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big obstacle as to why we don't. Now, so my encouragement is, like, in the face of disappointment, as David is writing this psalm in a disappointing season, like, this isn't the time to start waiting in silence. Like, the aim is, like, get in the habit of doing this even when you're not in a place of disappointment. So when you are in a place of disappointment, you've already established that pattern and habit, because if it's hard when you're disappointed, imagine how much harder it's going to, or if it's hard when you're not disappointed, how much harder it's going to be when you're disappointed, which usually means something didn't happen you were hoping to happen, something has happened you didn't want to have happen, and so you're navigating problems, which is not usually the time when we want to wait and be quiet.
Yeah. There's this verse that I like. It's Proverbs 2. And I've mentioned it before, but it says, "My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding." It's, it's really hard to be attentive when you're talking.
Yeah.
And so and there's another translation where it's like tuning your heart or tuning your ears to his wisdom. It's like an adjustment that like you physically position yourself in a different way that he can just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second decision comes from verses 3 and 4, which is, I'll read it real quick. It says, "How long will you attack a man to batter him like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? They only plan to thrust him down from his high position." So again, David is talking about what his son is doing to him, right? So he feels battered by his son. He's like a leaning wall. Which is like a leaning wall is a wall that's been around for a while. It's been beat up by the wind and the rain and people that have run up against it. A tottering fence. It's like the foundations have gotten old and tired and weary. So that's how David is describing himself right now. They plan on thrusting him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they cursed. Like, this is how David is viewing the people that he used to be able to rely on, the people that he should be able to trust. And the decision here, and this might not sound intuitive initially, but the decision here is I choose to avoid exploiting people's weaknesses. So in a moment of disappointment, it's really easy to start seeing how other people are how they're wrong or how they're at fault or where they are coming up short. And
to make it sound like you're not in all that bad or in the gutter, like everyone's in the gutter. Like, you know what I mean?
No.
That's like, it's really, when you're at your lowest, you kind of want other people to be low with you. You don't want to.
You want to drag people down to where you're at. And I think, usually it's a reflective response, right? It's like, man, if you hurt me, I want to hurt you back.
So I'm not like alone.
Yeah. And I think that's a very, there's a hurt people, right?
Eye for an eye.
Yeah. And I think that's knowing that about yourself and knowing that, okay, what do I do? Even when I'm not disappointed, how do I respond to people's weaknesses? Do I make fun of them? Do I gossip about them? Do I take advantage of it? Do I make light of it? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, how are you handling people's weaknesses that you see and that you know about? Because however you're handling it, when you become disappointed, when they disappoint you, that's when you're going to want to exploit it, because you're hurt, and it's frustrating. Because like I remember. I don't want to get too specific, but I remember I went through a season where I was hurt by some people pretty badly. And some people that I thought I could trust ended up demonstrating themselves untrustworthy and took advantage of some things that I had set up, brought them along in the setup of it, and then they took the credit for it and, took advantage of me. And when I confronted them, they were like, well, no, you're misreading and you're misunderstanding. And it's like, no, I'm not. Like, I wrote that, I developed that, and you grabbed it and you published it in a book and called it your own. That is not what that is. And they're like, well, I thought we did it together. And it was like they were dancing around all over the place. And I remember that when I found out about it and I approached him about it, and I was like, hey, what's going on here? And then I saw them like, oh, dang, you weren't supposed to see that yet. I went home and I was so angry. Because so the long and short is I found this book that a friend of mine had published, and 25% of the content I had written for other stuff. And he had taken it and he had published it and was taking credit for writing the book. And I was like super like hurt. And I thought, okay, and I prayed. And I remember praying like, all right, Lord, what do I do with this? Because I knew I could blow up this person's world. I could call him out. I had all the original documentation. I had all the original documents with the timestamps on it. I could approach the people that were the leadership in their lives and expose them. Like, there was all of these things I could do. And, and I really felt the Lord go like, no, that's not your path. That's not your journey. Like, this is their weakness, and I could totally exploit it. And the Lord was like, you're not going to do that. It was so hard not to do that.
I imagine.
It was so hard not to do that too. And your mom knows about this situation, and that person knows I know about the situation, but I haven't talked about it with very many people.
This is the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, because it's one of those, like, there's not any value in bringing it up.
Yeah.
And talking about it. In fact, I was recently in a setting where this person was being introduced as a speaker, and they're like, and they've published such and such book. And I was thinking, like, okay. Do you know what I mean? I was like, all right, whatever. That's not mine. I don't get to carry that. Like the Lord told me not to take offense by that. And so I'm not going to. I'm choosing not to exploit that. Right. So, anyway, so the first decision is I'm going to wait on God in silence. Second decision is I'm going to choose to avoid exploiting people's weaknesses. And these aren't just like decisions you randomly make. I have to choose to do that
ahead of time,
every single day, right? When am I going to wait on God in silence today? When am I, when I see somebody hurt me or fail me or disappoint me, or I see that they're weak and I'm strong, and if I point out their weakness, people are going to see my strength. How am I going to navigate that in a way that I'm just going to make some alternative decisions? Okay, decision number 3. You want to read that for us?
Decision number 3 comes from verses 5 through 8. Yeah. It says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is in him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and glory, my mighty rock, my refuge God. Trust in him at all times. O people, pour out your hearts before him. God is a refuge for us." And so the decision is I choose to trust God with a candid heart.
So I think the beauty of this is like when you think of it's David that is writing this, again, he says, wait in silence, right? So this is the second time he's mentioned waiting in silence. So if this were the lyrics to the song, it's like he's coming back to a lyric he already sang, right?
Right.
Which is to kind of like hit up one of the main themes of the song. But this is a guy who has an entire kingdom at his disposal. He has armies at his disposal. He has wealth beyond what you can measure at his disposal. He has political strength at his disposal. He has all of these things at his disposal that he could leverage to come against the person who's betrayed him. And yet, what does he say?
Trust in him at all times and pour out your heart before him.
Yeah, I'm going to trust God. I could do these things. I could utterly destroy this person. I could trust in my reputation. I could trust in the relationships I have. I could trust in the wealth that I've gained. I could trust in the influence and the power that I've had. I could, go down the list. I could do all of these things to solve this problem in my life, but that's not what David does. He goes like, no, but I'm going to put my trust in the Lord. I'm going to lean into that relationship. And I love this. I love this idea of having a candid heart. Years ago, maybe we've talked about this. I can't remember. Years ago, I read a book called Creativity, Inc. One of the best leadership books I've ever read.
Really?
And it's written by Ed Catmull, who's the former CEO of Pixar Entertainment. And one of the things he talks about in the book is he says, we talk about being candid at Pixar, not about being honest. Because you should always be honest. But you might not always be candid. Because there's times that you realize maybe what I should say or want to say or what I see, this person's not ready to receive yet. And so it's not that, if I'm honest, I can say, it's like, it's like, hey, what do you think of this? So in their context, they're making movies and people will be assigned like a short, maybe 3-second animation piece. And maybe they're new to animation. Well, they're like, hey, what do you think? Well, an honest answer would be like, hey, you're doing a good job. Or, we can see your talents here and we can see that you're growing and things like that. Okay, but that's not necessarily candid. Candid would be, so what they do is you'd work on your 3-second piece, and then every week they would gather up in a theater, and then they would show your 3 seconds to the entire room of animators that's working on that film. And then everybody gets to critique it. And so he writes about how the new animators, the first time you go to do this, like you'll work on this animation and you'll get it as good as you possibly can get it. And you can't see any other way for it to be improved. And then you'll bring it into this room and there's ways it can be improved, but you can't see it anymore. There's ways that what and your artistic talent are going to come up short, and in that room, all of that is going to be exposed. And so they'll play these clips, and the idea in that setting, they talk about giving candid feedback. It's not meant to hurt you. It's not meant to shame you or scorn you or any of those kind of things. It's for the purpose of producing a better product, for producing the best film they can possibly produce. And so, and this is back in the day when they're making Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., like the Pixar Incredibles, right? The Pixar classics. This is when they're making those movies. And so they would gather up in the room, and this animator would bring in their clip, and then people would start like, well, you should try this instead of that, and try that. And then instead of here, instead of the head tilting this way, have the head tilt that way, because that would communicate this instead of that. And I think you're trying, maybe shift the hand a little bit this way. And it's like all of these things. And the person, meanwhile, whose 3-second animation clip is being reviewed by all these people, they're taking furious notes, trying to capture all this stuff. And then the director will come in and say, all right, in light of all of that, here's where I want it to go. Here's what I'd like you to see you and kind of sharpen up on.
Yeah.
And then they leave with all of this information on how they can be better. And what I like about this is that David is going, I'm going to trust in the Lord. I could trust in all of these things. Mm-hmm. I could lean into all of these resources that have been built up around me, that people have been giving me credit for. I could leverage for this situation. I could do all of these things. But do you know what I absolutely have to have right now? I have to have the Lord's. I have to be trusting in the Lord. If I don't have him on my side through all this, it's not going to matter. Because at the end of the day, who gave me all these resources? Who gave me this kingdom? Who gave me this wealth? Who gave me these connections? Who gave me these relationships? Who gave me this political standing? Who put me in this office of being king of, Israel? Well, the Lord did. So who, at the end of the day, who do I need to be trusting in?
Yeah.
I need to be trusting in him.
And as I was looking at this, I wanted to get a picture of what a candid heart looks like from a biblical context. And there was this list of openness and being sincere and having a sincere expression and just being real. And then there was this at the very bottom, it would have not this, not that. And one of them was not rehearsed.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I feel like in our prayer life or in our postures, it's rehearsed. And it's not sincere.
Yeah. Do you know where the Greek word sincere comes from?
Mm-mm.
So,
do you know?
Or insincere. Yeah. So it's the idea of something being insincere. So let's say you have a potter, and they would have a clay pot, right? And they would take it, and it gets fired by the fire, and so it comes out, and so clay has been turned into this porcelain pot now, and they would put water in it, and see if it holds. And maybe it would hold, but then what you would do is you would hold it up to the sun. You'd put a candle in it in a dark room, and see it will expose whatever cracks there are. Right? And the better the artisan, no cracks.
Yeah.
But guys that are using cheap clay, they're taking shortcuts, they're not as artistically gifted or talented, or they've chosen not to hone those skills. What they'll do is they'll figure out where those cracks are at, and then they'll take wax and they'll put wax over those areas, and then they'll paint over it, because the wax will hold for a while. But the wax, and so when you hold it up,
it melts.
Well, you can't see anything, right? Because it's like you hold it up to the light. Well, no, look, it seems to be fine.
But wouldn't they sell it in the shade?
They would sell it in the shade. And it would be one of those things that would look fine. The price would maybe be normal price or whatever. So people think they're getting one thing, but what they're actually getting is something else, insincere. And so it would be this thing that then when the heat of the moment would come, that wax would melt away, and the flaws of the vessel would be exposed. And so in a lot of ways, what you're saying is that kind of a sincere heart is well, here's my flaws, right? I'm not going to hide that stuff. I'm not going to pretend those things aren't there. And I really like that idea. It's not going to be rehearsed. I'm not going to come in and pretend that. I was thinking the other day, this is just off the top of my head type thing. It's this, like very, very faithful and sincere thing.
Yeah.
Good. So again, like these are decisions to make. So if you're living with disappointment, obviously, trust in the Lord and take him your disappointment and trust him with those things. At the same time, like if you're not living with disappointment, if life's kind of fine right now, like this is the time to be candid with the Lord.
Start cultivating these behaviors.
Yeah, cultivate these decisions in your life. All right, decision number 4.
I chose faithfulness whether I have fortune or misfortune, which I thought was a good point. And that comes from verses 9 through 10. And it says, those of low estate are but a breath, and those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up, and together lighter than a breath. But put no trust in extortion. Set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart on them.
Yeah. Because I think in times of fortune, I like how that says that, in those times of fortune, when life is good, it's easy to start leaning into the nice things of life, the comfortable things. But what would happen if my life were to be stripped of all of those things? Would I still be kind to others? Would I still practice generosity? Would I still, have a good attitude over the course of the day? Would I still be in the Word and, praying and of support to those that are around me? Or do I have to have these, is my faithfulness hinged upon my circumstances?
We're just dependent on him. I remember there was a conversation in our Bible study, and we were talking about peace in our life. And one of the questions was, would you rather have glimpses of peace throughout your life or seasons of peace within your life? And a lot of people were like, just give me seasons. Like, I don't want glimpse. Like, that means that, like, I'm going through something really hard. And, I mean, for the majority of us, we have kind of all said, like, I want a season of peace. And then there was this one girl, and she was like, well, no, I don't want that. Because then if I'm in a season of peace, that means I'm comfortable, and I don't want to be comfortable. She goes, I want to be looking forward to something. I want a glimpse of something that I can have in eternal life that I don't want here.
So how do you square that up? Because, there's that passage that says that there's a peace the Lord gives us that passes understanding. Thoughts? Like, what in that context, what do you mean by peace, I guess?
Well, like, I would say, like, you're in a decent stage. Like, your ducks are aligning almost.
Okay.
Like, you're on the path God wants you to be on.
Okay.
You're in a comfortable state. Some could say.
Peace equal comfort?
Well, not like that, Dad.
Well, I don't know. I'm asking. Because I don't like the word comfort.
I know you don't like the word comfort, and it's the first thing that came to mind. But, like, in a season that's not necessarily terrible, I'd say, or disappointing. Okay.
I want to challenge you on that. There's this painting years ago. There was a paint this is a story I heard, right? I don't know if it's true, but it illustrates the point. Years ago, there was a paint competition. Paint a peaceful scene. And so, the day of the reveal came, and there was these paintings from these, all these painters that were known within this area. And so it was like, cows grazing in a field and very peaceful. It was, a beautiful day on a boat on the really calm sea. It was, kids playing in a fountain in a park. It was these kind of things. And then they got to the final painting. And when they revealed it, there was all these storm clouds that were pouring down this rain. And there was this waterfall that was just like overflowing and just torrential downpours. And the colors were kind of dark and muted. And then there was this tree. And in that tree was a bird's nest. And in that bird's nest was a bird, like a mother bird, whose wings were held out and the chicks were sleeping. And that won the competition for peace.
Really?
Which I thought was like super powerful when I heard that story, because that's a peace that passes understanding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
despite the circumstances
despite this,
yeah.
I don't need the day to be perfect. I don't need it to be an awesome, I don't need the sea to be calm. I don't need this perfect, serene in my head day at the park, playing in the fountain with my friends when I'm a kid, or as a parent watching your kids playing the fountain with their friends. Like, I don't need all of these external factors to all come into alignment for it to be just right in order for there to be peace.
Yeah.
It's this, no, who's my protector, regardless of what's going on. I'll have peace.
Yeah.
So to me, that's like when I hear that, every time I read that passage, a peace that passes understanding, that story comes to mind. And that image, in fact, it's an actual painting. And if you Google peaceful peace in the storm or something like that, it's a painting that's out there.
No, that's good though.
Yeah. So, okay. So the decision is I choose faithfulness, whether I have fortune or misfortune. Right. I'm gonna be the person God's called me to be, regardless of life, if life is good or bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Decision number 5. I choose to believe in the power and steadfastness, love of God, regardless of my circumstances, which kind of comes to what we just talked about in a lot of ways. Once God has spoken, so this is the passage. Verse 11 says, once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God. Verse 12, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love, for you will render a man according to his work. Which I can't help but with this passage, but think like David's doing some self-talk right here, right? He's telling himself, hey, remember, your son right now is trying to steal power away. He's trying to take your power away. But who does power belong to?
Me, yeah.
It belongs to the Lord alone, right? Your son, who if there's a handful of folks that you go like, who should you expect to love you well, regardless of what's happening? Your spouse, your kids, your parents. Do you know what I mean? Maybe super close friends. And yet David is in a situation where like the son he raised does not love him. And he goes, well, to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. Like your love cannot be defined outside of it being steadfast. Like that's one of the things it is it is steadfast. It is always there and always present. And this idea that like, I'm going to believe in that power. I'm going to believe in that kind of steadfast love, even in a moment where it might not look like it's coming through for me.
Yeah.
And again, these are great decisions to make when facing disappointment, but these are decisions to make regardless of what's going on in life. So that when you do come into disappointment, you're in that habit, you're in that groove, you're in that posture of choosing and living and deciding.
And then it's like, and then the Lord will provide to a man according to his work.
Yeah.
I kind of do wonder what would have happened if he just like blown up at his son.
Well, it's a funny thing because in a lot of ways, it's not too dissimilar what happened to David at the beginning of his life.
No, yeah.
With Saul, right? Here was a man that Saul had sinned, and God said, you know what? I'm taking the kingdom away from you, and I'm giving it to this other guy. And Saul finds that out. So Saul, and he tries to hang on to his power as long as he possibly can. So something that the Lord was taking away and giving to David, Saul tried to hang on to. And then here you have David at the end of his life. He's an old man at this point. Here you go. His son is trying to take power away. It's this dynamic of wrestling, people trying to wrestle away from you what God has provided. And I think, I wish I could say, that's David and it's a unique set of circumstances. Don't ever have to, fortunately we don't have to worry about that. But it's like, I don't think that's the case. I think, people face that in their careers all the time. You have a job that the Lord provided for you, but then the roles and responsibilities that were given to you, other people become jealous of, or they want to take it away from. Or you write a bunch of curriculum and then somebody takes credit for it and publishes it in a book. Right? I mean, you could go down the line. It's going to happen in your life. At some point, someone is going to try to wrestle away your hard work. And in the short run, it might look like they're winning.
Yeah.
But it's stepping back and going like, well, at the end of the day.
And I think that's like why we need to remember and be like intentional of like our past seasons so that we can know what the fruit of that bears.
Sure. And we should do a podcast on that. I have a whole thing on like seasons of delight, seasons of desert, season of darkness.
Seasons.
Yeah. And how do you, what is produced in each of those seasons that's distinct to that? And how do you navigate that in a way that deepens your faith and strengthens your walk with God? We'll put that in the podcast idea folder.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, kiddo?
Not particularly.
Yeah.
No, but you definitely opened my eyes to more context than...
It's interesting when you put the Psalms... When we know the context of these, man, it like makes it feel more...
It's more vivid, I would say.
Yeah, that vivid's a good word.
Thanks. More candid. There we go.
Vivid. I like vivid.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
You can
like, subscribe,
share.
And share.
Share.
Please share.
Hey, if you know someone who's going through something that's hard right now, this could be a good podcast to share with them. Or, sometimes you can anticipate disappointment. You can go, I know I'm heading into a series or there's something that's coming up that it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. I know I'm going to have to wrestle with disappointment in it. Maybe pass this along to that friend and have some conversations about it. We always provide show notes, which have the all of this outlined and the texts that we were referencing. You can find that on our website, thisresilientsoul.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter when you get there.
Please come check it out.
And by doing that, by doing all the like sharing and rating and following and reviewing, if you do all those things, you're going to help us get the traction we need. And that will let others know what they can expect when they listen to this podcast. If you want to get a hold of us personally, a few of you have been doing that lately, which has been fantastic. You can email us at hello@thisresilientsoul.com. That way, that's a direct line to us. It's not public. And if you do that, you can help us. Let us know what's sticking and what tracking. Or if you have ideas on how we can deepen the quality and expand the impact of this podcast, we're always welcome and open to receiving those. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on X.com now. And we welcome the interactions and be able to hear what's working there. If you have ideas and what you'd like to hear us discuss, we welcome that kind of input. Thanks for listening this week. Appreciate it.